Hello and welcome to a very insanely dangerous 80s film fest with myself, Gaz, and my co-host, Dangerous Dave.
Hello there, Gaz, and everybody listening.
I'm sorry, you caught me mid-sip there. I didn't realise that was it. Okay, but let's go.
That was it.
That was it.
I didn't know there was a special one to be. I'm very happy to be here.
standard, insanely dangerous retro Podsho kind of stuff. Actually,
yes,
this is how we operate. Marvelous. Okay, good. Now, if anyone wants to listen, you know how we operate. But we want to give a redunculously big thank you to the Jacked Up Review for inviting us on. Suckers. No, I've promised to behave myself. You're not suckers. I've promised to behave myself. Dange has to actually talk to the neighbours, so I can't be throwing any wild parties and throwing any flaming dumpsters over the fence or anything. So I should be good. But so Dange and I decided to pick our top movies each, and then debate, where these would stand in a combined top 10. Dange, being Dange, swiftly and efficiently selected his 5, and I crapped out at about my top 55. And this is all whilst sweating and panting and swearing vociferously at the wall. So we had a last minute rethink, and I came to the conclusion that I could sit here sobbing from chronic irresolution, or I could ask the Danger Man what his top 10 80s flicks are, whilst I scream at him about his wildly offensive emissions. The things that he leaves out of his top 10, because those who can't bitch. So that's what I'll be doing. So, Danger Dong Den, let's hear us. Let's give us your top 10.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I managed to get mine down from the top 55, so but I don't think I could actually rank them in top 10 order, because these are
right.
List them out, but not in any particular order, because I don't know. I'd find it too difficult. It'd be forever. So I would start off by going Stand By Me.
Oh, yes.
And then
beautiful.
I'd move on to Gremlins.
Okay, yep.
Then it would be Top Gun.
Oh.
Police Academy.
Oh, I forgot about. You know what? I actually completely forgot about Police Academy. I know, but you know what? It absolutely makes sense that you, of all people, would remind me. But yes, go on.
Next one would be Heroes Cop.
Nice, yes.
And then Juice.
Yes, excellent. Okay.
Be the Goonies.
Bold.
Planes, Trains and Automobiles.
You know what? I was waiting for you to say that. I actually thought it was going to be I actually thought that was going to be. I know you're not doing these in order, but I thought you were going to say, here are my top 10 films, Planes, Trains, Automobiles, straight away. But
then I'd have Ghostbusters.
Oh, lovely. Absolutely. Standard bread and butter. Great.
Absolutely. And then finally I would have Back to the Future in there as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, and just as I promised, I'm going to scream at you about your wildly offensive emissions. What the hell is wrong with you? No, let's go through these films really quickly before we take up all of our slot just bitching. Stand By Me, obviously an absolutely smashing film that I think I've got my daughter that I talk about quite often on the show. I've got her to watch. She's only 12. Got to watch, I think now twice. She actually preferred it the first time she watched it when she was about 7. And she thought it was amazing at 7. And then when she watched it when she was about 10, she was like, meh, it was all right. You could see her twiddling her thumbs. It's like, oh, you just don't understand I weep for the future. I really do. But that is absolutely tremendous stuff, and actually means a little bit more to me since I've started watching a documentary about the children of God, like the cult that River Phoenix was part of when he was a child, and to see him break away and do something amazing like that, then have that then suffer that untimely death. It's just heartbreaking. Just makes me, because his character dies in the film, doesn't he? Eventually.
Yeah, apparently so. Stop a robbery or something.
Something like that. Yeah. And I just think, well, it just breaks my heart hearing that. And I think it always means a lot to me, that film. And I think it does to a lot of people, even people who probably not going to listen to a 50p calamity cluster what's it podcast like ours. They'd probably love it as well. The second one you said, Gremlins. I mean, it's such an, in a way, an obvious one, but at the same time, it wasn't in my original. I did my top 5, and I was like, yeah, those are great. And then I looked, and then I thought about it, and I thought, for like half an hour, and I went, nope. And number 3 down to about number 40. But that's not to say that it's not tremendous, because when we when I watched it around Christmas time, I like my soul was doing backflips. That's a tremendous film. And like, would you say it's in the top 10? Would you say that's in the top 5, or would you say that's in the bottom 5?
I don't know. That's a tough one for me to answer.
All right, how about this? Or top, middle, or bottom?
Middle, maybe.
Middle, yeah. I think I see what you mean. Like it can't lace the boots of Stand By Me, but I don't think it deserves to be number 10. But there you go. Top Gun. Now, Top Gun's one that I omitted. You talk about wild, crazy emissions, but I was like, well, yeah, I left that one out along with like The Color Purple and Raging Bull. Like, these are great films, obviously. And now I'm having a real good think about it. I kind of like the really corny scene where, like, Tom Cruise chases after what's her face on the bike and the car and everything. I was like, oh, I quite like that now. And of course, it was the inspiration for one of my favorite comedy films, Hot Shots. There's so much to love about that film. There's so much to, like, pinch the bridge of your nose and go, oh, really? But it's, oh wow, so good. But yeah, anyway, got to move on. Police Academy now, quickly, because I've been waffling for ages. What's the number one thing that you can think of that puts Police Academy in the top 10?
Oh, I mean,
all right, or the top 3 things.
the cast of Police Academy is amazing, and just the comedy of it was great. Comedy and cast, and for me.
Comedy and cast. Okay, right. Now, absolutely. Number 1 and number 2 were in the 80s. And I feel like there's, in some way, even though I do think number 1 is a superior film, there's some things about number 2 that I think are better. Not a lot, but there's some things in number 2 that are better about, than in number 1. So I had to include it, because it meant so much to me when I was a kid. It was, first of all, you got the uber cool Axel Foley theme tune. Do 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 do, and obviously that was ruined eventually by the Crazy Frog. If I don't know if that translated to anyone else in the world, but oh man, Crazy Frog. Let me know about that, Roberta. Beetlejuice. Oh, cracking. Absolutely. This was without a doubt. This, I think, for me, if I had to really think about it, this is top 20 for me. Right. I don't want to say where I put it in the top 20 because I don't actually know. It jumped into my subconscious straight away, and I just love the. Now we've seen lots of Tim Burton, and and lots of other bits and pieces that he's done, it does look a bit tired. It does look a bit silly. Not silly, but it's like, yeah, okay, it's not as mind blowing. It's not as bonkers as it first was, the first time you watch it, because we've seen so much Tim Burton stuff from going forward. But for I don't know how old I was, 7 when I watched this, it blew my mind, and it's like the 7-year-old version of being on acid.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Do you understand?
Yeah.
I mean, was it you? Did you feel like that? Was that something that you went like? I don't think I'm able to actually comprehend what's going on. I just really like it.
Yeah, it felt strange to me as well watching it as well. But I mean, I was a fan of Winona Ryder at the time as well. So, I mean, it was a great film. It's a great film to watch with the effects and what was going on in it. So yeah, I know what you mean.
All right, okay, we're going to come to a very obvious one, so Goonies. And I know a lot of people are going to. There's going to be some people who like. When I was a teenager, I was very, very cynical. In my early 20s, I was still quite a cynical person. And I say, oh, really? You're going to pick that one? Well, isn't that a bit obvious? As you get a bit older, I think you become, you're still cynical, but you're cynical for slightly more intelligent reasons. God willing, you actually get a little bit more intelligent as you get older. The Goonies I've never, as much as there are plot. There's a few holes. I'm not going to say it's not quite Swiss cheese, but there are a few holes here or there where I'm a bit like, oh, you've let yourself down there. But other than that, it remains one of the best things I've ever seen in my entire life, and genuinely, I associate the Goonies with happiness more than anything else in the entire world. Yeah, apart from my daughter and the love of my life. But I associate the Goonies with a rainy day, sat indoors with people you care about, snacks, fizzy drinks, and just watching something that blows your mind and gives you so much joy every single time you watch it. Now, the only thing that comes close to that for me is Labyrinth, which is not your top 10.
No, it's not.
Again, wildly offensive. Would be so disappointed in you. Nelly, for people who don't know, is my daughter, who is David Bowie mad and has watched Labyrinth almost as many times as I had, and that's impressive because I think I might have watched it about 300 or 400 times. So yeah, the only thing that gets close to the Goonies for me is Labyrinth, and so fantastic pick. Again, another like a similar question. Was that high up or low down in the 10?
Goonies is probably high up.
Oh, well done. I wouldn't shout at you if you said low down, but let's face it, I probably would have done.
You would have
done. Okay, what we got next? Oh, planes, trains, and automobiles. Yes, like I said, this is the Dange. This is the Dange pick. I absolutely knew I could have put my life savings. That's really not a lot, but I could have bet my life that you would have picked planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah.
When you just know someone, you spend so much time with them, and you just know, that they're going to pick something. And it is a tremendous film. Like it's got a beautiful end. It's got a very sad but beautiful ending. But it's one of the John Hughes. Am I right?
Yeah, it is.
It's one of those John Hughes ones. I've got everyone, please don't hate me, but I do have my issues with John Hughes, and we've discussed this on the show. This is one of these John Hughes films, like Home Alone. I know you had Chris Columbus directing Home Alone as well, but there's something about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles where it's not full of plot holes or like little insignificant silly bits that just pop up here and there. This is one of his absolute best films. This is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I genuinely want to strangle and kiss John Candy in this film. Not at the same time, just at different points throughout the film. He's an irritating shit. Steve Martin he's got a stick up his ass, but I love them so much. I both love and hate them in equal measure at different times, and it's kind of like why us English people love Only Fools and Horses is that they're all wearing different hats at different times of the episode. One of them is an idiot, one of them's a smart one of them's the indifferent one, and they all swap hats throughout the episode. And I feel like it goes in between. It's a little bit like that. It goes in between. John Candy and Steve Martin's characters. One's being an idiot, the other one is keeping it all together. And it switches back and forth, and John Candy can be a little bit more down to earth, can't he? And I remember having a chat with you about it, and you've told me about how much you love John Candy in this film, and you think this is like one of his best performances.
Yeah, I do. Definitely one of his best performances.
It's as much as part of me wants to start a row. And so we can have a really good discussion about this, just so I know I can offend you and you can go, well, no, this is wrong. You're completely wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. I actually have to agree with you 110%. I think John Candy turns into, he's not just a comic. He turns into a world-class actor in this, and I love him, and I wish nothing but the best for him come the end of this film. So I think that in that respect, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that does actually creep in as like a surprise member of the top 10. But then you go with something else which everyone's thinking about. You go with the last two, which everyone's thinking about, going, yes, you have to put that in there.
Yes.
I didn't actually put either of these in my top 10.
Okay, well.
I have no idea why, but then at the same time, I was picking 55. I couldn't get past 55. Ghostbusters. Right. Wow. I mean, what do you say about Ghostbusters? I mean, like, have you seen the reboot? Not the reboot, yes. The sequel.
Yeah, but Afterlife.
Yeah. Now, what I know it's not 80s, but what did you think about that? Did it stand up to? Was it closer in quality to the first one or the second one?
I mean, it wasn't as good as the first one, but I would say it was pretty close to the second Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed the oh god, my brain isn't working. I enjoyed the cameos of the original Ghostbusters, and I like when they
yeah.
So that was very good.
No, it was really nice to watch a film with no disrespect to people who younger viewers, younger listeners, or anything, but quite often I think kids will speak in, and I've mentioned this on the show just the other day. Kids in films tend to speak in quips, and they don't, and they can be made to look really irritating, rather than like kids in the 80s. So if you watch something like E.T., not in your top 10, but if you watch E.T., the kids really do make this film. They really do. It's wonderful listening to their dialogue. It's fantastic. And actually, Ghostbusters Afterlife is not too bad. It's a little bit going in that direction, but yeah, you're right. I don't think it matches up to the original. I don't think there's anything that could ever match up any Ghost film. I mean, we're talking. Ghost itself was like 1990, I think. I can't think of any Ghost films in the 80s that really. I mean, Beetlejuice is something altogether different. That's just Tim Burton on a fucking LSD trip. Excuse my French. That's just Tim Burton on an LSD trip. That's mental. Anything like slightly supernatural, with an element of comedy, element of drama, there's nothing that can get near that. That's tremendous. And we'll go very quickly on to Back to the Future. Crikey, alrighty, great Great Scott. Now, this didn't make my top 10. Well, I was just writing them down in a long list, to be fair. This was quite far down, funny enough. But when you said Back to the Future, I heard the orchestral music. I got goosebumps. Oh, I can see the goosebumps on my arms right now. And there's a bit where Doc is trying to hook up the wires to the clock tower and everything. And he slides down, music's going, and you're not sure because when you're a kid, you see you see Doc Brown, you think, this guy's like what 100. There's absolutely no way he's going to be able to make this, and it's like I'm so excited. I'm now pushing 40, and every time I see Christopher Lloyd slide down that wire, I'm on the edge of my seat, almost in tears. Like it's brainwashed me from an early age, and that's what it is. It's not that it's not a fantastic film, but I have been brainwashed. And aside from that, I think that I think that the absolute madness of going back in time and Marty being completely blown away and discombobulated is the standard. It is the gold standard for time films, and I don't think anyone will ever be able to convince me of anything else. I mean, what's and for me, I think as much as I love the goosebumpy bit of Doc Brown sliding down, I have to say that I've been let down so many times by other films that opening bit where he walks into Hill Valley in the 50s, that has just ruined every other time travel movie ever for me. What would you say is your favorite bit? I've given you 2 bits there. Is there anything else there that makes you? I mean, is there a comedic bit? Is it Leah Thompson trying to get it on with her own son? Not that you're weird, no. It's funny. It's funny. Is it Crispin Glover turn around with that that big right hook, which I loved as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go for the bit where he plays Johnny B. Good at the school disco and then goes a bit nuts at the end, and they're all stop dancing and just look at him. It's like he's just kicked over the amp and all that sort of stuff, and he's like,
I guess you kids aren't ready for that. I know. I guess you guys aren't ready for that.
Yeah,
but your kids are going to love it.
Yeah.
And of course, you got the nice bit just before that where it says, Chuck, this is your cousin. Yeah. This is cousin Marvin Berry. I love that. That new sound you're looking for. Took me years to figure out what the hell that bit was about, because obviously I didn't know who Chuck Berry was. And then what was the other bit? Oh, and then Leah Thompson says, "Oh, Marty, that was some very interesting music." And he says that bit where he says, "If you guys end up having kids and one of them accidentally burns the rug, don't go too hard." It's just that's a really sweet bit that warms my heart. And I think you needed to bring down the excitement level just a little bit, and you needed to love everyone, and that's a great before some more action happens. And that little bit right there, if it went straight from the kick and the speaker straight into the car and everything's going wrong, I don't think I would be getting the goosebumps that I did today. But that was paced brilliantly. Yes. That film. Thank you. Honestly, I was an idiot for not putting that in for not thinking of it sooner, and it was actually closer to like 30 or something like that for some reason. You're absolutely right. No, I think that's an offensive omission from well, again, it was in the top 55, but I should have thought of it sooner. I should have had it close up to one of my top ones, which would be no surprise to you, is Big Trouble in Little China. But that's different subject altogether, because we've actually got an episode about that. If anyone listening wants to come and have a listen to the Insanely Dangerous Retro Podsho, but this was only meant to be about 10 minutes, and we've gone on for forever.
Yes. Well, we'll just have to leave it there, won't we? So.
Right. Sorry about that. Thanks for having us on. Say bye-bye, Dangerous.
Bye, Dangerous.
Hello, everybody. This is Duty from the NFW podcast. I've been asked to join this show or make a little recording about the 80s movies, and if anybody grew up in the 80s, you definitely know that this was a time for kids that really lots of great movies coming out and different genres of movies. So I'm going to try my best to do a little quick run through of some of my favorites. As far as horror movies, in the horror 80s was probably the best time for slashers and other genres of horror as well. But for me, the one that really kicked it all off and started the whole deal, the original Friday the 13th. Yeah, I know some people will say Halloween was the one that kicked it into gear, but I think it really, once Friday the 13th came out and became as popular as it did, everybody tried to make a horror movie at that point. And it was a lot of good, a lot of bad, a lot of indifferent as far as some of the movies go, but probably one of the best times ever for horror movies in day and age when you weren't seeing that kind of stuff. So for me, definitely Friday the 13th, I think really kicked it all into gear. And to me, it's still one of my all-time favorite horror movies ever. As anybody who listens to me knows, that was the movie that kicked my love of horror movies off, and away I went. Next genre, probably teen comedies. You had a ton of teen comedies in the 80s. And for me, the one that, well, I guess one of the ones that really burst it at its seams for me was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That movie's just fucking hilarious. It's funny. It's a non-stop ride. And then you got movies like Weird Science, The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles. These movies, Just One of the Guys, these movies just rolled on and on throughout the 80s and were very, very successful. And I think it was another really cool genre. My next, probably sci-fi for the 80s. Maybe I would say like the Terminator really got me going into loving the sci-fi movies. The original Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton. And you had the Back to the Future series, They Live, Dune, Enemy Mine, Short Circuit. I mean, Bill and Ted. So many classic 80s comedies / teen movies that coming out at the time. And, you know, it's just, the 80s were pretty amazing. Then you had a run of the teen sex comedies, which, you know, was even more fun. But of course, you know, if you were a kid in the 80s, they're hard to see these movies because they actually enforced the R-rated rule back in the 80s, so you couldn't just go to the theater. You had to like sneak into the theater. So yeah, I remember one time my buddy and I, we paid for like a PG movie, and we snuck into Angel, which isn't really a teen sex comedy, but it's an 80s crime movie. And we snuck in, and my buddy, the guy come up to my buddy and asked to see his ticket. And so instead of saying he lost it like I said, he shows him this ticket and he had to go see a different movie. So like a dumbass, he went and I stayed and watched Angel. But yeah, for me, probably Porky's or maybe even Risky Business was the one that made me love these type of movies. And from there, it was Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Private Resort with Johnny Depp. Oh man, so many of them. Spring Break, just so many cool, fun 80s sex comedies out there. Just One of the Guys, which isn't even rated R, it's a PG movie, but that one's like one of the most funniest movies I've ever seen. Yeah, so I was struggling to maybe find a fifth movie or series of 80s stuff, and I remember I was about 16, and all of a sudden we started getting these Italian cannibal / zombie movies in the movie theaters, but they would only show at like 11 at night, midnight at night. So they're like these special showings. Movies like City of the Living Dead, House by the Cemetery, Anthropophagus, New York Ripper, these type of movies. And I remember we got permission to go see I think it was Burial Ground or it was Gates of Hell, whichever one that one is. And yeah, we went to see that, like a midnight showing. I was 16. Luckily, my parents were pretty cool, and they gave the okay to let me go in and see that. But yeah, it was pretty an interesting see, because I'd never seen an Italian horror, let alone a zombie movie before. So pretty fucking epic, if you ask me. A 16-year-old kid getting to see one of these movies in the theaters, which, you know, now we all have access to most of these things easier, at least. And most movies nowadays are on Blu-ray, and even some are coming out on 4K. So, yeah, I mean, the 80s, if you grew up in the 80s, it was an amazing time. And I know a lot of people are like, well, you know, you're stuck in the 80s because that's when you grew up. So, but I don't care. It may be nostalgia or whatnot, but I will still say to this day, until the day I die, that the 80s were probably the best time to watch movies. Not even name so many other ones. We got Demons, and with the music of Goblin, which is just incredible. You know, these so many, the Shark Jaws ripoff, The Last Shark, it's just so many out there. Great White. So yeah, if you guys are not, I mean, I don't know, whoever listens to this show, I'm sure they know all this genre already, but I just want to thank Cam for inviting me to do a little spot on the show. I appreciate it. And if you guys want to listen to my show, check it out. It's the NFW Podcast. We're on the Dark Discussions Network. And I also do a show called Is It Really That Bad?, where we do a lot of the really terrible, terrible movies, and we watch them, and are they really that bad? And you know, I'm on a bunch of other shows out there as well. So check us out. We're on Facebook and all that good stuff. And thanks again for having me. And until next time, bye.
And they're back with a vengeance. The Movie Rankers. Pretty shitty sound effects, but that's what I did.
As a proper 80s intro, it's very appropriate for the show.
And this is definitely the start of Don LaFontaine becoming a big movie trailer. So we had ranked kind of the best of the 40s and 50s and the 60s and 70s, and now we're just kind of doing a free roaming. Once again, this time that's 80s kind of centered. And James and Colin, welcome back.
Well done. Thank you for having us back. Yeah, it's been a while. So
anytime. Cheers. Not to be confused with screenwriter James Burrows or Colin Mockery, the comedian.
Quite funny. I don't know.
I'm your host, Kev Soley, not James Cameron. Speaking of who, he pretty much makes his start in the 80s. But yeah, so what introduced you to this period of film? Would you say this is where you started watching movies the most from, or were you just kind of?
This is the decade we were born anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go.
Well, it's not like we just popped out and whacked in a VHS, though. I mean, there must have been a point in the 90s where we kind of thought, well, what we're watching now isn't that good, so let's see what happened. No?
No. From the age of 4,
right,
I was watching Ghostbusters.
Okay.
Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Stuff
nice.
like that. You know, it was just, I think with the 80s, that was the start of, you know, special effects. There was original ideas. They were trying to, you know, it was the start of...
Everyone was just coked up. So they were just
I guess there was
there was so much creativity flying around because everybody was on drugs, and they thought, well, how can we make things just epic. Everything in the 80s is just brilliant. It's so
pretty
much fun.
much. Some of it's left over from like the 60s and 70s strain of independent films and sex crazed and violent induced movies, and then some of them are just like trying to pretty much, it's like basically they just take just kind of storytelling to a whole different level by having fourth wall breaking, characters talking to the camera, montages with just synced wave music. And I mean, there's so many filmmakers that get their start here. Alan Rudolph, Milos Forman, you know, with Ragtime, and you might know him better from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but that's a highlight of the 70s. And Stephen Frears is a big guy. He does a lot of crime thrillers like The Hit that stars a then unknown Tim Roth. And John Hughes basically immortalizes just teenage high school comedies with Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and so much more. He's done so many other sleepers, but everyone nowadays often will just cite Home Alone. I'm like, no, it's got to start with Breakfast Club, my dude. I mean, you're off to a good start there listing, you know, Karate Kid and freaking Ghostbusters, because it's like, I can't think of anyone who doesn't not like name a quote from like one of those kinds of movies. It's interesting because like there's so many other people who like had they not been born then and not seen it then, it makes you wonder would it had, you know, be as big now. It's just so wild how certain crowds
it just seemed started so many franchises. It was everything seemed like a fresh idea. Now I mean, everything's just a rehash or like a reimagining, isn't it, from movies?
Yeah, some movies nowadays do a good job of like rehashing what we love about the 80s, and then there's so many others which are just like, oh wow, so much wrong sauce. You just don't understand what made these movies good, and you're just doing it to death. And obviously, you know, all the major titans, you know, Bruce Willis shows that TV stars can act with Die Hard, and then, you know, Schwarzenegger, you know, punches and has just numerous one-liners. You know, I just can't think of anyone who hasn't seen The Running Man, Conan the Barbarian, Terminator,
Mondo, all that. You know, yeah, it was. What was it at the start? What do you remember the 80s? What was your favourite? Your one you kept reading?
I mean, I'm the horror guy, so I think of films like Fright Night. I think about The Blob,
the Blob, The Thing, obviously Aliens, Predator, even The Hidden.
Yeah. Or one of Peter Jackson's early films called Bad Taste. Have you seen that one?
Bad Taste, The Evil Dead. Yeah,
dude, when he's drinking that bowl of like alien puke, and he's in the line, he's dreading the puke getting to him, and then he has to taste it to maintain his cover among these aliens. And then he tastes it, and to his surprise, he likes it, so he goes back for seconds. It's just quality. But I mean, the 80s is just so many, like you were saying, so many stars got their big break in the 80s, and you kind of feel like you grow up along with them as well. Like, you know, Eddie Murphy and Tom Hanks as well. Tom Hanks was
Bachelor Party, Money Pit.
The Burbs, big, and
the Burbs.
Yeah.
And the Burbs is just one of many of Joe Dante's just many forays into this with The Howling, First Gremlins, and Inner Space. He's just on top of it. So basically, anyone not working for Roger Corman has a career. You know, it's like they're making just so many just experimental entries. Steven Soderbergh comes into the fold with Sex Lies and Videotapes, and you know, on the Murphy Point, you know, obviously 48 Hours, and you know, without that you don't have Die Hard or Lethal Weapon, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the first kind of buddy cop films, wasn't it? 48 Hours, where you got the kind of the grizzled detective and the criminal smart-ass criminal who's not, he's a bit endearing. He's not really a bad guy, but he is a criminal, and he always gets treated like a criminal, and that kind of rubs him up the wrong way. And
you're right.
But like you say, there's so haven't had that since.
There's no original idea, there is, but you know, everything.
Everyone forgets we're stars because everyone just associates them with their, you know, made-for-TV direct-to-video crap. Like, Mickey Rourke, Daryl Hannah, and Eric Roberts all become stars with The Pope of Greenwich Village, which is still just a great hustle crime thriller.
Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget the year where Eric Roberts went from, starring in quite a big film like The Dark Knight for Christopher Nolan. And then less than 18 months later, he's in Sharktopus, which was like a straight to DVD, one of those really crappy Sharknado horror movies.
Yep.
I'm like, dude, you were in some awesome films back in the day. And it felt like your career was getting back on track being cast as one of the mobsters, but
he's got a ridiculous amount of credits to his name, though, hasn't he?
Yes, yeah. He's one of those actors that's just in everything.
Yeah.
Hey, he has to work. He loves it. He's bored. He's not going to say no, and he's not going to try and make sure that it's at least something that he would actually want to see. And all those stars, they followed up with other hit movies like Splash and Best of the Best, and what's the other one Rourke did? I think Barfly was kind of a hit back in its day, but
that is just
it's on Netflix right now as we talk. So
that's the 80s action down to a T. That is, if that's just.
Why do you think people don't like to call movies like that and Rocky or Karate Kid action? I'm just like, it's martial arts. What else would I call it?
We had this discussion earlier.
We were literally talking about this before we came on, because when I was making my notes, I listed some kind of I listed my top 5 kind of outside of the mainstream movies based by genre, and I've put Karate Kid in drama because there's a bit of fighting going on in there, but it's the I think the film is more about the story of this kid. He's moved to a new town, a new city, doesn't have any friends, he gets bullied, and he meets this old man. And I think the film's really about their relationship and their kind of journey that they're on, rather than the action.
That's fine. I'm pretty much just like a multi-genre guy, so
totally
sci-fi and the horror and aliens, for instance. But I'm just like,
it was just really because I was thinking about what movies were in the fantasy genre. You got things like Batman Returns, Big Trouble in Little China, Masters of the Universe, which is
Beetlejuice.
Still the best depiction. Of
Canon Films goes apeshit. I just got a Blu-ray of Life Force the other day, and it's just funny how all these cult movies that were considered trash back then are still kind of immortalized. People still go back and watch them. So something like Texas Chainsaw 2 or Dune or
it's like companies like Scream Factory can come out and bring them out for $50 on Blu-ray, and people are still going to buy it, right?
I mean, definitely.
Totally.
But then also you talk about action. You got stuff like Roadhouse. And all that sort of
Roadhouse, and
I mean that has just turned itself into a cult classic anyway, wasn't it? I don't think it even done that well in the 80s compared to what it did in the 90s. I think it got more famous with the older it got, that film.
Right, and it's kind of like how in the 40s or 50s, you just had movies that, if they weren't hits, they still played constantly on TV more quicker than the big hits. And when you get to this 80s and 90s, that's kind of, with people embracing VHS and satellite cable, it's just interesting how there's just even more just kind of cult underground movies. And you see even other just established filmmakers getting even more experimental, like William Friedkin tries his hand at some other crime thrillers and partial horror movies like Cruisin', and just totally different from his earlier 70s hits, The French Connection and The Exorcist. And Hellraiser comes out of this, and that kind of changes up how gothic-y and Lovecraftian some of these horror films can really show some inspiration from.
Yeah, and the best thing about the time as well is everything was done for real, right? So there was no really shitty CGI. It was all latex and real kind of.
If it is bad, it kind of adds to the appeal. It's animation.
As well. Yeah, you think about the mother being dragged through the door at the end of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's awful, but it's part of the experience, right?
I remember being petrified of Freddy with the long arms down the alleyway when I was a kid. But you look at that now and you're like, that is so shit. I mean, it's just it. But back then, I think it all added because it looked odd, didn't it? So it scared you.
That and Friday the 13th were definitely franchises that kind of got too much for their own good, but you can understand why they built such a fan base because people just ate it up.
Well, they made money at the end of the day, and the studios knew, okay, so what do we need to do? We need to get another load of sexy-looking teenagers around a lake and get some guy with a hockey mask to murder them. And they knew they would make their money back plus, a decent amount of the box office. So it's a no-brainer, really. And then
totally,
they in the 90s, those franchises fizzled out.
And then, as I said, there's no more original ideas. No. And now they're rehashing everything again now, aren't they?
Or they're rehashing them, but to the point where it's like, already know the ending 20 minutes in. It's just that unengaging. And it makes you wonder what could change. If you're going to do a rewrite, could you at least... Exactly. Could you format it differently? Could you cast it better? And
I think that's one of the things is when you have these films in the 80s that you loved as a child and you watch them and you really enjoy them, and then they go away for so long and they do bring them back, like
Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Like Ghostbusters Afterlife and what they're trying to do with the new Beverly Hills Cop or triplets with Eddie Murphy and that kind of stuff.
I don't think that'll ever come out.
Yeah, you want it to be as good as it was, but it just never is it?
Well, Ghostbusters Afterlife, but they're capturing people of our age because we want to go back and see these characters we grew up with, and they're also trying to get our kids involved in that as well.
I actually even ended up digging the new Terminator Dark Fate and Blade Runner, but I think the other thing is those movies were just so poorly advertised.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mind Terminator Dark Fate. It was great to see. It was great to see Linda Hamilton back as that character. And
what should have been the third part, but they just.
I just don't think they've known what to do with Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator since Terminator 2.
No.
Like, okay, so he's a bad guy, then he's a good guy.
He's a bad good guy.
Yeah, why does he have to be good? Like, why can't... I guess in Dark Fate, there was a scene where he was bad, where he killed Connor. And
basically, I kind of actually like that twist, where it's like he was bad, and then because the people he was going after weren't in that, he was in like the wrong timeline or something, he basically stopped being relevant and broke his programming.
Yeah, he grew a conscience.
Yeah. Smarter than the average bear. But yeah, I mean, like, then you see some of these other 80s movies and you're like, wow, this wasn't a hit back in the day? I just can't even imagine. And you see other younger stars just kind of, I mean, it's a who's who of just like who's still working versus who's a rising star. I mean, Morgan Freeman gets some attention later in the 80s for being a murderous pimp in Street Smart and one of the battalion soldiers in Glory. You see some of these other rising stars who appear in some gangster movies like The Long Good Friday, and you're like, wow, those guys are a lot of stars who've become big names. Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, Bob Hoskins. Oh my God.
Samuel L. Jackson was the robber from Coming to America, wasn't he?
Right. And there you go. Yeah. It's like,
now he's in everything.
If you don't do a cameo in a comedy with a big dude, then you can make a cameo in like a stand-up concert or on SNL or wherever else, and it works. Full Moon Entertainment gets a start with Trancers and From Beyond.
Yeah, I know it's not technically a movie. There were movies made from the TV show, but never in this day and age will you have a TV show with Bruce. They had Arnold Schwarzenegger. They had Brad Pitt. There's so many big actors were in that TV show who went on to do.
Sorry, which show? My internet broke up.
Sorry, man. Tales from the Crypt.
Oh yeah, that started in the late '80s and got bigger into the '90s, and I mean, hell, there was even a Twilight Zone movie. Even though it's a shame that it's really not half bad, but it's just forever.
It's tarnished, isn't it, with a helicopter? Yeah.
You're right. It's just that. So I think that just showed how studios needed to get safer with making various movies, but it was also kind of a sign on how behind the scenes negative press can absolutely kill a movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is the same because that Dan Aykroyd scene was just
it was
brilliant.
Look at also in the 80s, look at the ambition people had. I mean, with like films like Back to the Future, RoboCop, these are really ambitious projects that, you know, they had to try and sell that, didn't they? Like a cyber.
Oh yeah, and
and you look at how much that cost and what it was overrun by. The effects in that, like when you know, with the melted at the end where he gets hit off.
With the toxic waste,
all that sort of stuff. It's just like you'd never seen anything like that before. The 80s just seemed to push boundaries to
even the overseas movies, like Michael Mann, you know, of Miami Vice fame, does this movie that he's kind of disowned, but won't ever talk about, called The Keep, and so many people love that one, even though it's very obvious that a lot of footage is missing from it.
You're saying overseas. I mean, you want to look. I mean, look at the boundaries Jackie Chan was doing in Hong Kong then with Police Story, Armor of God, Project A, Dragons Forever. All those films were ambitious, you know, and what they were doing in the 80s was just pushing boundaries from the old school kung fu films. They were just starting. Well, I mean, the Police Story franchise, that's still going now, virtually, isn't it? I think they're even talking about doing another one, I think. But
1,000%. And he utilizes his training and charisma and his other friends, and they just keep making just outrageous, you know, comedies. Dragons Forever is definitely a highlight of his that gets underseen. And
the Lucky Stars franchise with
the Lucky Stars with One Bio and Benny the Jet.
Benny the Jet, it's just, they seem to, I mean, the 80s just seem to start everything for Eastern Condors.
Yeah, Eastern Condors is just hysterical because it's like, it's just such like a good job.
Yeah, it's kind of like their version of a Rambo, Samo's version of Rambo.
Is like every other movie overseas is basically in the Philippines trying to be a knockoff of Platoon or Rambo or even Commando. And I mean, you guys were mentioning horror earlier. I just look at some of the giallos, like by Argento, like Inferno, and even Lucio Fulci's Seven Doors of Death, also known as The Beyond. And you're like, I can totally see why these were constantly shown at just drive-in theaters.
100%. And that's lucky if they can get like the uncut versions of those films, because the
uncut print,
the Italians were raw. Man. They were raw.
Yeah.
Like there's some stuff in there that even makes me wince today.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to explain, and even when there's bad acting or nonsense in it, you just kind of just love to just kind of let the nightmare fuel just comes naturally to you. George Romero follows up his, you know, zombie films with Day of the Dead, and I can see why that one is just constantly quoted. And
you also got stuff like Poltergeist. I mean, that scared the crap out of me.
Was it bouncing?
I don't know. Well, I mean, when did that come out?
Poltergeist.
Yeah, was that 80?
82. So around the same time as The Thing.
Yeah, it was. When I saw that, I don't know, it just freaked me out. I think it was more of the paranormal side of things that could get you in your house and all that. Because it wasn't in your face horror like.
It was more suspenseful.
Yeah, exactly. I think that got me more than some of the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff.
Yeah. Good soundtrack as well. I think you touched on the soundtracks earlier, Cam, with the synth music, and you know, you've got John Carpenter doing the soundtracks and the scores to, you know, The Thing and Escape from New York and stuff like that. And they're just, you still listen to them today. They're quality songs, quality music.
Totally. It's even hysterical seeing just what bad sequels we have and just wanting to know the bizarre history of how they came up with something even awful like Jaws 3D or...
You know what? I don't mind Jaws 3D.
Don't start slandering Jaws 3D.
Well, that was supposed to be. Wasn't it supposed to be like a spoof, like Airplane or Police Academy or something like that? It was called like.
There's no telling.
Wasn't it? It was supposed to be called like People Zero Jaws 3 or something like that, and it was going to be like a spoof, and I'm glad they didn't go down that route, but you know. I mean, it's completely plausible that a shark could get into a sea life place. And
Yeah, but not the same shark or whatever it is, or the offspring of the shark or whatever the story is.
I don't necessarily think they make a connection between
They not
the sharks in the franchise.
What's wrong with Michael Caine then? Did they do it with the shark? Wasn't that meant to be?
Jaws of Revenge, yeah. But no, there was just another shark.
So,
I don't think they're saying they're related. I think Brody in the second film thinks, one shark talked to another and said, and then there's a line in the film where
they kind of imply it's a giant mama shark in Jaws 4, but it's just bizarre because you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah. And the ending of that film is completely ridiculous, where it jumps out of the water and she spears it with a boat. It just doesn't make sense. Sharks don't.
Right. And when you're seeing some of these other tough guys doing sequels to movies from an era ago, like, Dirty Harry, and it's just like, man, these guys just won't stop making these wacky movies.
I think
Deadpool, though. The Deadpool, that is bloody good.
The Deadpool's awesome. Yeah. I got Sudden Impact down on my list as well.
Is good, yeah.
But no, I was going to say, actors coming back to do more films. I think the only actor that's really done it well was Stallone when he did Rambo 4.
Oh, mate, that was
he brought that, but obviously Rambo 3 was done in the 80s, and then they do Rambo 4. What was that? Mid 2000s?
Yeah, something like that.
2010? No,
it's okay. I just feel like it's a totally different kind of viewpoint instead of one that really helps it. Because I mean, Part 3, he shits on that one so much, and I just always kind of just dug how he was in the Middle East and he just felt like he had no country to answer to, and so he helps out, Taliban in another country. But I mean, then it's just even more interesting seeing kind of the So Bad It's Good movie kind of take form. You got, Charles Bronson doing all the Death Wish sequels, and
they just went on, didn't they?
And then just standalone ass-kicking movies where he plays an assassin or cop or someone hunting a serial killer.
Basically, you never want to be Charles Bronson's wife or daughter or stepdaughter in any of his films because they always get just destroyed.
Right. Years before Frank Grillo and Liam Neeson were making a living beating people up.
I always used to get confused because I always thought there was a Clint Eastwood film. I think it was 80s. It might be 70s called Tightrope.
Yeah.
I always thought that was part of the Dirty Harry franchise, but it's not, is it? It's separate.
It's just a standalone mystery movie.
Yeah, he's going after a strangler, wasn't he? There was this strangler he was after, and
that's what they did pretty well. Is just kind of illustrating various slashers and giving the bad guys some persona and having some suspense. There's a really cool movie with Martin Sheen called The Believers, where his kid is kidnapped by a demonic cult and just didn't receive any attention despite being by some high-profile names. And John Schlesinger, a Marathon Man, directed it. It's like, man, I can't believe this movie flopped. This is terrifying.
It's funny. Yeah. I mean, because what did you have in the 80s to relive those memories from those films? I mean, VHS was very, very expensive. I mean, I think I didn't own a VHS tape until sometime in the 90s, and even then it cost
totally a VHS player, but again, that was expensive too.
Yeah, completely. But how would people go back and watch these films and experience that? Would they need to wait for them to come on TV?
Well, that's what we were saying about Roadhouse, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, you could do a mixture of TV as well as rent on, digital platforms or discount DVDs. I mean, there's definitely a market for people who wanted to get into the psycho film kind of films like Maniac by William Lustig, and there's a really neat movie that's like one.
Oh, that was 70s.
Is that Rutger Hauer?
Yeah. Was that 70s or was that 80s?
Hitcher, I think it was 80s.
Yeah, The Hitcher, in 1986. And I love how he does a bunch of other cult movies like Wanted, Dead or Alive, The Blood of Heroes. And he does Flesh and Blood for Paul Verhoeven, which is a cool kind of satire on the ruthlessness of sword and sandal epics, and kingdoms and, poor people. And there's a cool earlier Martin Campbell movie years before he becomes a James Bond filmmaker and so forth, which
I think
Yeah, he has one cool one called Criminal Law that has Gary Oldman as a lawyer trying to see if he can trust whoever he's representing, which is the very shady Kevin Bacon. And it's another one of those just gripping movies. And I see a lot of people often reference Dead Calm, which comes out at the very end of the 80s. That kind of changes the game in terms of how you can have kind of a, a home invasion doesn't have to take place in an actual home. It can take, place on a boat, with a couple, mysterious drifter.
Yeah. There's a film from the 80s that I have yet to find out the name of the film. And I vividly remember watching this. It was on TV really late at night one night. And it's about this guy. He's stalking this woman in like an office block or a shopping mall or something like that. And he's trying to kill her. And some guy comes to her kind of rescue. And his name is John Doe. And I think, I think the killer and the John Doe like hero guy kill each other at the end in like this car crash. And I remember it being like a really cool film, but I've explained of what I remember to so many people and nobody can tell me.
Google exists now.
I've Googled. I have Googled. I've Yahooed. I've been.
Any actors by any chance?
No, I can't remember any more than that.
It sounds suspiciously like Shattered with Tom Berenger, but that's from the 90s.
Okay. I'll let me
Trying to kill each other in an office space.
Yeah, it was like an office. I remember like, so the two women are leaving for the day and they're the only people in the office building. And one of the ladies gets dragged out of the elevator and she gets killed. And then the other one escapes. And then, yeah. And I've
tried some of those groups where you ask, what is the movie? And so often I'll say something and people just won't have any idea. I'm like, God damn it. I know there's some cable TV heads out there.
Yeah, completely. But that one has eluded me so far.
People trying to kill each other in an office space.
It's either an office block or a closed down shopping mall or something like that.
Well,
shopping mall.
No, it's not that.
That's
what the robot. And it's got the guy, Mr. Pudderman from Gremlins. Is that his name? Mr. the one that drives the tractor.
Oh wow.
Mr. Pudderman or something like that. His name's Dick. What's his name? Dick Smith.
Oh, Dick Miller.
Dick Miller. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Dick Miller.
What film were you saying about then? What, that?
Shopping mall.
Oh, right.
He plays like this janitor. Really small part. Yeah. He's another one of those actors from the 80s that just pop up in things from time to time. You're like, I don't know his name, obviously, because I didn't, but I remember him from Gremlins or this film or that film. It's funny when you get
actors of the 80s though. Michael Keaton. Look what he did Batman and Beetlejuice. That was just like two of the most
like you wouldn't see somebody of his stature.
Characters.
Yeah. You wouldn't see someone of Michael Keaton's stature being cast as Batman now, would you?
No, and it's where everyone has to remind everyone, it's like, hey, it just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's bad, and it's got to remind them, it's like there's all these movies that basically serve a purpose of just what they do is basically just reformat how movies can be promoted.
Because they took a big risk casting Bruce Willis for Die Hard, didn't they? Because he wasn't an action star at the time.
No, it was just like comedy, TV.
Yeah,
TV actor,
and that's why. So my first experience with Bruce Willis was the Die Hard films.
Yeah,
and then he got more action roles. And then when I saw him in Death Becomes Her,
or Hudson Hawk,
or I'm like, oh my God, he's actually a really good comedic actor as well. And then I think he just started taking himself too seriously, didn't he?
Yeah,
and got a bit of a big head and a bit of an ego on him.
Yep. Overall, I mean, then vampires take a turn. You got movies like Vamp, Lost Boys, Near Dark.
Vamp terrified me. I remember watching that when I was so young, and my mum had come in late from work one night, and I had this. I was watching something. She says, "What are you watching?" And I told her what I was watching because the babysitter had just left, and the babysitter just had no clue what I was doing. They didn't care. So they had left, and we were watching this vampire film.
Give me your money, you damn rich parents.
Yeah, completely. It's like my mum walks in, and it's just at the time where Grace Jones, is she like, are they like strippers in that film?
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
Yep.
They're strippers, right? And there's this bit where Grace Jones, and she kind of lifts her hand up, and her fingers are so long, and they're nails, and then she just slashes this guy. And my mum literally screams at me to turn the TV off. And I'm like, I didn't think it was that bad. But then I had nightmares for ages. But vampires in the 80s were sexy, right? Like, you've got Jerry Dandridge from Fright Night, and he's Chris Sarandon. He back in the 80s, he was a good-looking fella. But yeah, 80s vampires were sexy, and then you get into nowadays where you've got things like Twilight, and they're starting to pull it back now. But
yeah,
what happened?
Part of me definitely wishes that just some other actors is like they would be in like 2 mega hits back to back, and then not do anything in the 90s. And it's like, man, I mean, what happened? And he's just so good in that and Child's Play, and you're like, yeah, neither of those needed sequels, but they just did the sequel train to death. You see movies that you can't believe that studios thought were going to flop, but they ensured that they did not flop through unusual means. Like when you read about how Flashdance was supposed to flop, but they included the trailer on all home video prints for other Paramount titles. And it was like, that's how they got people to go and see it. I'm like, that's so wild. So here was a movie that they thought wouldn't make any money, was way darker than intended, and just by playing it safe, they made it way better.
Yeah.
I always get confused with Flashdance.
Flashdance was the welder one, which he does the...
There's Flashdance, Footloose, and there's another one, isn't there?
I mean... I'm sure there's plenty of movies with the word dance in them. I mean, Canon Films does dancing, knockoffs of their breaking formula or Dirty Dancing. So it's like, yeah.
Van Damme's first film, that wasn't breaking. He was popped up in the crowd there, didn't
he? Electric Boogaloo, yeah. And this is kind of where kind of just the grindhouse and exploitation kind of dries up. It's so wild how so many podcasters will review movies that not only just constantly change in tone, but like there's like 3 different versions of them lying around. Like there's some movies that are they're porn, but they also got crime and action and horror elements. So you're like, it's kind of whatever genres.
I just throwing ideas around, wouldn't I, and see what's stuck.
Right. Just put as much tits and gore in it as you can.
Try and just get everyone to watch it. Have a little bit of everything in there for.
Worry about the TV edits later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, look at what you were saying. You've got on that list, haven't you? Like Above the Law, Tango and Cash, Bloodsport, Kickboxer, all the 80s action stars as well. They just I think it was just a decade of great action, wasn't it? Really, that just kind of led on.
Yeah, manly men, sexy women.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. What do you remember about comic book movies from the 80s?
Oh, definitely a bizarre time because like you just had all those awful Superman sequels and
Howard the Duck.
Oh yeah, I unfortunately saw that.
Start a franchise.
Yeah, just more desperation at starting a franchise, more bizarre cult movies that you'd watch on USA Up All Night, and it's just so funny how you'd see a lot of them anyway just because you wanted to see just unusual special effects and gimmicks, and it just couldn't be helped. Unfortunately, you were going to encounter movies that were embarrassing or you didn't want to watch with family, and it's just so wild.
Yeah.
And Dolph Lundgren does The Punisher, but that didn't really find its audience until years later. And yeah, I mean, I pretty much at that time, everyone's just kind of becoming a larger than life role. Like Harrison Ford, just dominates as Indiana Jones. And it's like, yeah, it's just anyone can be an ass kicker,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it's not 80s, but look at Liam Neeson now. I think he was around 60, maybe 58, 59 when he did Taken.
Yeah, and it's actually fun revisiting some other 80s movies he's in because he has bit parts in Excalibur and Roland Joff's The Mission, which is just downright epic. And
I forget if Darkman, is that 80s or that 90s?
90s, but I mean, that's just it. He always kind of had physical feats. He just often wasn't utilized. He almost became a James Bond villain. And who would have thought? Yeah, Timothy Dalton playing James Bond, and just that those movies did not do well. It's like, really? Wow. Okay. He was.
No, it was a different time, wasn't it? I mean, I don't think James Bond as a character did where, you know, with the 80s and the whole thing was sex in movies, and you know, people were learning about AIDS, so they asked sex to be kind of cut down and things like that. But I think Dalton was a good Bond. He was dark. Like
he's really funny and charming in the first one, and then the next one he's the fugitive, and it's like a violent episode of Miami Vice. You know,
yes, yeah, with Robert Davi as Sanchez.
Davi, yeah, and Davi's in that. And, well, he's later in the Maniac Cop sequels, and it's interesting how just so many people basically got a bunch of movies coming out, and it's just they had to embrace different markets. Like some movies would do great in Japan or Berlin, but not great in the UK or US. And you're like, really? Okay, wow. There's something for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, look at Hasselhoff. Didn't he blow up in the 80s in Germany?
Yeah, exactly. It is like everyone's pretty much can do what they want to do without being told whether or not they're good at it or not. You know?
Yeah, because I mean, he can sing-ish, I guess.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy and William Shatner think so too. So
yeah. To be honest, I don't mind Eddie Murphy's song.
I don't mind either, but it's also just cool just seeing how many actors or singers decide that they want to act like Roger Daltrey of The Who, Madonna, and you're like, wow, okay, it's not half bad. It's really not half bad at all.
I think you've got to be very talented if you want to be. There are a lot of people that are either an actor or an actress that tried to be a singer, or a singer that's tried to be an actor or actress, and it just hasn't worked out. But I mean, during the 80s, like I say, Madonna did some fantastic work back then. Not so much these days, but back then.
No. Dick Tracy, 80s and 90s. That was 90s.
90s.
Yeah, but I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, in all fairness, that's where Al Pacino kind of just gets more experimental. Is like, wow, Scarface bombed at the time. Wow, okay. It's kind of a fun party movie nowadays. So
it's just one of those. It's one of those all-time. You hear that line, "Say hello to my little friend." You know what film it's from, and you know who said it, right? Like you may not have seen the film, but you know about it. And I think that's what one of these things where
fucking cockroach.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I mean, there are many 80s films that I probably haven't seen, but I know of and I know about because of they're so quotable.
It's time to revisit it. And
yeah. You were saying about Schwarzenegger's one-liners. I mean, there's that video of him on YouTube with like 100 Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liners, and you could
listed off, aren't they?
Yeah, you could easily replace any of them in any film, and it would still make sense.
Right. Bigger than the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's this little-known character actor. His name is Peter Weller. He's gonna be RoboCop, and it's a satire, but the audience will eat it up, assuming it's an action. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a weird film.
What?
RoboCop. Like from the outset, like the person who came up with that, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Right. It's a cyberpunk kind of takedown on corporations that create awful things that kill people, and it's just so wild how I think so many people take it straight face value, and it's like they don't get some of the imagery that they're joking about, how he jokingly comes back, kind of Jesus Christ style.
Yeah. I think the death of Alex Murphy in that is I think that haunted me more than anything.
It's extremely violent, yeah.
So graphic.
It's when he's on his knees and he gets
and he's begging, and it's just like, you know, I think that is probably one of the worst things I would definitely too. It was just very
graphic, just seeing how the blood
really?
splatters across the screen.
Yeah.
Like, I should not be watching this, but I kind of want to see this movie, and it's kind of intense.
Yeah.
And just the story of it, isn't it? The demise and the rebuild, and then the destruction of what
Right.
they want.
Is it about him reclaiming his?
Yeah, there's so many layers.
individuality?
There's so many layers to that film, isn't there? And it's
Right.
I
Even
think that wasn't like 80 quid on VHS. to buy
Yeah,
it,
very
so
expensive.
they could recuperate the money that they went over budget with them. And it's
insanely expensive.
Yeah.
right. And just so many movies at that point, you just want to even just buy their soundtracks because they got the greats like Basil Poledouris and Jerry Goldsmith and just all these guys just basically having the movie take a whole different identity based on how they score it. And overall, it's just one hell of a decade. Are there some movies that haven't dated well because, you know, they're practically about teen sex or just very misleading serial killers? Yes, some of them have dated poorly, but some of the ones that are over the top are still just one hell of a time. Like,
I mean, you look at our list, and again, like Back to the Future, Goonies, you know,
Adventures in Babysitting.
Yeah, that. Yeah, you know, Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, Beverly Hills Cop. These are all, you know, Predator. You could just go on listing films that
Return of the Living Dead, and it's just fun.
As popular today as they were when they come out.
Oh, totally. There's actually a lot of great zombie films. There's one I'll leave you guys with, Warning Sign, that I think has finally, just because of repeat airings on HBO and just the material that's detailed in it is like those have found a home years later and gone in Shout Factory Blu-ray releases. It's like, man, that's awesome, because these are movies that people need to find that deserve to be refound. And it's just so wild how some of them, you can totally see their influence, and definitely not just in the 90s, but like they're loosely referenced by indie filmmakers even, you know?
Yeah, 100%. It's weird as well, isn't it? Because you had this period of the 80s and the early 80s where you, as a filmmaker, you could really push the bar.
I remember watching films over here that got stupidly edited because, you know, age restriction, all the laws over here were different to what they were in America. And when we started getting copies over and watching the film.
Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, that got massively cut over here.
Yeah.
It was always funny seeing what was pirated, and is they had the region codes, and yet so many CDs, you can import them anywhere. They don't care. I'm like, so why is music, you can get it anywhere, and movies, they want to put up certain restrictions on certain cuts?
Yeah.
It's almost like they've come full circle on that now, because 4K Blu-rays aren't region locked, so you can get them anywhere, and they'll play anywhere. But, you know, even with DVDs and Blu-rays, why would you restrict your audience to certain areas of the globe?
A lot of it's just cultural. Like, I know you guys often had a lot of movies that got cut because, you know, there were use of massive attack weapons, and they were afraid of people imitating it, and then it didn't help.
The difference between us and you folks there is we don't have access to those weapons. You know, right? So if you're gonna censor it anywhere, censor it where those weapons are actually available, right?
Right, in the States. Just don't even refilm it. Don't even have it.
Exactly. It's like the complete opposite. It's like all we get over here is like all our police officers have is maybe some pepper spray and a baton.
Back then, they had in the 80s, they had a baton.
Nowadays, they got giant assault weapons and SWAT team armor. So, yeah, I mean, it's like it'll never stop. Like, there's certain storylines that have to be altered. It's like you see America and China still talking shit about each other, and yet it's apparent in so many of these kinds of movies. You're like, yeah, we hate you, but we'll still do business with you.
Money talks, doesn't it?
Money talks. So it's just so wild how a lot of these movies can form a conversation. And I just roll my eyes anytime no one understands the social commentary that's talked about them. They're just now getting it. Yeah, it's just like the Donald Trumps of the world. I'm like, yeah, you didn't know that? I mean, it's kind of the point of the movie, unless you just were asleep at the wheel and paying attention to the content.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gents, for being on here. It was a massively fun time.
Lots to talk about in this episode. Lots to
There's stuff we haven't even covered, like Top Gun and all that.
Oh well, that's it. It's like pretty much the '80s. You can detail it however you want it. There's the propaganda war films. There's the giant, massive scale. I mean, Akira Kurosawa sums up one of his final epics, Cage Musha, is like so many people are like on their deathbed making their final masterpieces. David Lean's A Passage to India is a great one, but not many saw it because everyone is already catching up on his earlier masterpieces like Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia. So it's just so cool seeing, again, like anyone who wants to see all these great film greats works, they can still find them now, and just the lists keep changing on what are certain filmmakers' most underrated works.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of smaller labels releasing decent films, like Vinegar Syndrome, 88 Films, Eureka. All these are like finding all these hidden treasures, and they're revamping everything.
Studios you didn't even know existed, but have for some time, and
yeah, it's good. So definitely, I think
what do you guys got coming up that you'd like to promote real fast?
Still waiting for a few interviews to come in and stuff, aren't we? Really?
Yeah, you got a convention you're going to.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I've got the Fighting Spirit Film Festival over here. We're going to that. Well, I'm going to that on Saturday. They've got the premiere of Mark Strange's new film, Rupture. So I'm going to see that. And they're also showing the full cut of Drunken Master 2 at the cinema.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I know. Seeing that on the big screen is going to be brilliant.
It's so hard to find an uncut version of that 90s movie.
I know. Well, I think the reason they've got their hands on it, there may be one getting released soon, I think. There's rumours of it. I don't know if A8 Films have got the rights to it or not. I don't know. So
let's hope.
Yeah, that could be cool. And what, you're going to a horror convention soon?
Yeah, there's a horror con up in Sheffield in the UK that I'm hoping to go to at the end of May. But that's
so we might get a couple of interviews there as well. But yeah, we're just trying to do a few things, but it's obviously with the situation at the minute, it's not quite straightforward, is it? So yeah,
done when you get it done.
yeah,
absolutely.
But
thanks for having us back, man. Yeah. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keeping me on schedule.
That's right. We will speak to you soon then, my friend.
You know it. And seriously, just stay safe out there and just keep doing just 5 things that just make you happy every day.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
We're on all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a Jack